What crazy ass story do you need to tell? This is one long ass story, but the coincidence is astounding. I'm from a tiny province in the Philippines who decided to work in Manila right after college way back 2007. I got into a call center and met a lot of friends. Stayed in the company for about 2 years. Graveyard shift wasn't for me. Fast forward to 2013. My widowed mom in the province met through a mutual friend, a French guy, and they both got interested with each other. They eventually got engaged in 2014 and married soon after 9 TDF France, so they could move back to France. As they were planning their trip, I posted on social media about possible Filipino connections in France to help my mom transition well. A former colleague of mine in that call center in Manila many years back sent me a message. Told me that she has this Filipina friend, let's call her Awina, who has been living in France for 20 plus years now, and that she may be able to help my mom. So, I told my mom to add Rawina on Facebook and connect with her. They got into talking. One day my mom was Skyping with her. They were talking about their husbands when my mom pulled out and showed to her a vintage photo of her husband when he was in university. An old photo of him sitting on a couch with his then best friend whom he has not seen since graduating. Career opportunities abroad and no cell phones during that time led to them growing apart. As soon as Rawina saw the photo, she gasped, "That's my husband beside your husband," she said. She then hurriedly went to her office and took out the exact same photo which her husband has kept through the years as well. After a few shocks and tears, two long lost best friends were able to catch up after nearly 40 years. Too long didn't read. By amazing coincidence, two best friends found each other through their wives. For context, I'm a 19-year-old Scottish guy who was interrailing around Europe for a month. We were in Budapest for a few days hitting up the clubs and parties, really enjoying ourselves. Eventually it comes time to leave, and we decide to get an early morning train to Split around 5 AM. Anyways, we have 2 taxis booked to the train station and we stumble out still kind of half asleep and start loading our stuff into the taxis. As we are loading, we see 3 young guys sprinting full speed ahead up the road shouting ducking run. We laughed. Thought they were just having drunk fun. No, they were not. As we get in the taxis, this guy covered head to toe in tattoos and others' blood comes to my door and asks to shake my hand. Not wanting to offend this crazy looking ducker, I shake his bloodied hand and he wishes me well. Phew. Got off lightly. Guy tries to do the same with our big duck off Bulgarian taxi driver. He refuses. Bulgarian taxi driver gets in taxi and starts to back out. Crazy duck is not happy with this and starts to go to town on this guy's taxi with elbows, fists, knees, etc. We start to drive away thinking there's no chance he's gonna be bothered to follow a taxi going 20 mph. Right. No a-hole here, this duck is ducking Superman. Sprints faster than humanly possible after our taxi with this mad look in his eye. Taxi driver goes to turn a corner, thinking we'd got away from him. But as we turn, there's a bin lorry blocking the entire road. Crazy duck rounds this corner like an atom out the Duck-in Hadron Collider. At this point I'm shouting half asleep Scottish at our taxi driver, lock a duck indoors, which he thankfully does. Crazy duck starts battering the windows in with fists. Blood smeared everywhere. Knuckles burst. Rips off the wing mirrors. Starts smashing the windows in with them. At this point our friends in the taxi behind us are buckled in laughter as we sit in pure terror as the duck in Grim Reaper looms ready to take our souls. Both taxi drivers get out to get him to duck off. Spits in both their faces and throws the wing mirror at them, then books it out of there. Maddest thing about it is as he was leaving he very nicely apologizes to one of the locals watching this in awe. Too long didn't read, don't refuse handshakes from men covered in blood. It's rude. I work in a supermarket as team leader. I'm quite social, so I like to include everyone who's new and make them feel comfortable. So there was this new guy, around 17 years old, who was very quiet. He spoke only when spoken to and no one really tried to converse with him. So I did. I was very kind to him, and at first he wasn't really approachable. But over the weeks he came loose and was kind to me as well. Yet, no other co-workers did this. However, I did not give it a second thought of why not, but I knew why when he quit after 3 months. Turned out he had to this as some kind of community service. He's a criminal and my cheap ass supermarket hired him because they only had to pay him 1/2 of the normal salary. But that's not all. A year later or so, some drunk dudes in a bar started a fight with me. Was not big deal until I went home. 5 of them waited for me at the exit. I did not want my friend involved, so I just kept on walking away like they weren't there until they legit stopped me to beat my ass. And there he was, the guy from the supermarket with his gang banging friends. I never felt so cool in my life. 6. Dudes around 21-25 years old came to my rescue because he was my friend. They threatened them and asked them tell us why we shouldn't kill you right now. Couldn't thank him and them enough, and after that we went separate ways again. Sometimes I still see him and we give each other a nod. A little while back my roommate was contacted by a wealthy man in the area who wanted to pay her to be his live-in pet for an entire month. She thought that this was a cutesy way of saying that it was a sugar daddy baby arrangement. Turns out what he actually meant was that she would be given room, board and a very healthy allowance to spend a large portion of her day dressed as a cat, walking on her hands and knees, eating out of a bowl, using a litter box and, yes, sleeping in a little cage at night. Sex wasn't even on the table. He was only interested in having a human cat for a month. She seriously considered the offer for a weekend and then politely declined. When I was learning to fly at a sketchy flight school, I was doing a pre-flight check flight close to the end of the program. I was doing the run-up in a Cessna when I smelled something. Do you smell that? Smells like gas, I say. Instructor 21 years old shrugs, annoyed. I open the door, and there is a spreading puddle of avgas under the plane. Shit. The instructor panics, stay in the plane, I'll get help, and runs off. As soon as I got the engine off, I noped out of there and watched the plane dump all its fuel on the runway. They kindly gave me another plane and instructor. They fixed their plane, and a month later, I read about the same plane crashing due to fuel issues. 1 fatality, no significant repercussions for company. Here goes. It's quite a long one. I'm from Belgium and have traveled a lot with my parents. When I was younger, when I was still together with my ex-GF, we traveled a lot as well, but neither of us had been to the USA. So we told this to a befriended couple, and a few beers later we started planning a trip to go on together. Because another mutual friend was studying in Philadelphia for a year and we might as well go visit him. First we went to New York and Philly for a few days, then took a plane to LA, rented a car, and took a road trip through Cali, Nevada and Utah. During this road trip we'd often laugh about some of the dumb shit we'd heard or seen people do in America. We had a bunch of jokes about people in smaller villages and all kind of crazy stuff they might do. We had just been to Sequoia National Park, and we were looking for a place to spend the night and eat because it was getting late. Found some old farmhouse where we could stay in one of the fixed up cabins and asked the old lady who rented it to us where we could go and eat something. Mind you, this little town was called Pinehurst and had an extremely low population. She pointed us to the Pinehurst Lodge, which was basically the only restaurant bar store for miles. Went there, ate an amazing meal, and decided to grab some drinks afterwards and shoot some pool. As we were playing pool, this old giant approaches us wearing a jeans shirt that said George with Bush picture of an eagle. He had a bushy mustache, looked very tough for his age, and we thought he was going to give us trouble about using the pool table and laughing too hard. He is to this day one of the kindest people I've ever met. He asked if we were having fun and if he could join us. He bought us moonshine, which we obviously thought was hilarious, and we bought him a few beers as well. Had a blast the entire evening. While we were playing and drinking, the phone behind the counter kept ringing, but none of us was paying attention to it. By 23h30, all of a sudden, a woman comes barging in with a gun in her hand, looks at us and stomps over. I felt myself getting nervous and getting ready to react if I had to. She stops behind our new friend, grabs an empty beer bottle and smashes it on his head. We were all perplexed with what happened. She proceeded to shout insults at the man and started hitting him. He calmly tells her to relax, turns towards us, shook our hands, told us that if we ever came back, to be sure to let him know so we could hang out again, and then went outside with a woman. As we stood there, still trying to understand what just happened, the woman at the bar just shouts at us that's his wife. He's a bit of a social butterfly, and she had already called 10 times to ask when he'd come home. We thought it was pretty cool and all, so we told her, oh, okay, we are just going to leave as well then. It's getting quite late. Oh, no my dearies. It's best you stay a little while longer. The shouting you hear outside is still them arguing. And I can tell she's quite pissed at you guys, because she blames you that he hadn't come home yet. And I have to say it wouldn't be the first time she shot at someone for keeping him too long at the bar. So best you stay a little bit until they leave. So we stay about 30 more minutes. All the while they keep shouting outside. Then we hear a car start and see a white truck speed off. Within seconds we see a second truck speed after the first one. This was in the mountains, with very narrow and bendy roads. Both cars just leaving at an insane speed. We hear the bartender say, she drives our children to school with the bus, you know. This would never happen at home. 100% would go back to Pinewood Lodge in a few years. As an American this is pretty funny though not exactly common behavior. Loved that at one point you called small towns villages. Not technically wrong but very European. Years ago I was hitchhiking north of Richmond, Virginia when a car with 2 dudes picked me up. We got to chatting, and it turns out they were headed to their friend's place to shoot guns, and asked me if I wanted to join. I asked if his friend would be okay with a random homeless-esque fellow shooting his guns, and he said heck, just pretend to be my cousin from Seattle. So instead of sitting on the highway in 100-degree weather I spent an afternoon eating hamburgers, shooting guns, and blowing shit up with bags of Tannerite on some random duty employee's woodland property. Don't remember your name dude, but you were the man. Thanks for a great memory. Why does your cousin look homeless? He's from Seattle. Makes sense. I stole my own car back once. I used to restore classic cars. I had the most valuable one I've ever had at a body shop, and he took forever to finish it. He had painted other cars for me, but apparently developed a drug problem. I would check on the car every week to see if there was any progress. Finally, after a year he told me he painted 90% of it, but he's asking for more money than we originally agreed. I drive there on a Friday afternoon unannounced, and see my car outside the shop worth a ton of money with the shop owner nowhere in sight. His neighbor told me he had left the car outside for 3 days and several people have tried to steal it. So I call a tow truck and tow it to my garage right away. On my home the shop owner calls me over and over again. He thought somebody stole the car. He kept calling me for months. I never responded. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.